I'm now delighted to be joined online, especially streaming live on our YouTube channel, by the world-renowned sprinter Ato Boldon. Ato Boldon, a four-time Olympic medal winner, a 200 meters world champion in 1997. I suppose, Ato, we've left you a difficult task now, spanning back 30 years. All the great sprinters in the 100 meters and the 200 meters, going back over 3 decades. And what we've asked you to do, Ato, this evening is rank from 10 to 1 well, who you think and the all-time sprinters in relation to the rankings going from 10 to 1. To be eligible for this, Ato, we said to ask you, you have to have achieved either 100 meters, being an Olympic 100 meter champion or a world champion, and likewise in the 200 meters you have to be a world champion or Olympic champion. So for example, if you achieve the silver medal in the 100 meters or a bronze in the 200 meters at Olympics or World Championship, you don't qualify. So, Ato, 19 different names. I'm just going to give you a rundown through the different names. So, first of all, we have yourself, Ato Boldon. Then we have Carl Lewis, Linford Christie, Donovan Bailey, Maurice Greene, Kim Collins, Justin Gatlin, Tyson Gay, Usain Bolt, Johan Blake, Christian Coleman, Michael Johnson, Frankie Fredericks, Costinos Canteres, John Capel, Ramil Gulyev, Noah Lyles, Michael Marsh, and Sean Crawford. And just to say how difficult and a task of achievement is, we have great sprinters like Asafa Powell, world-renowned in the 100 meters, never an Olympic champion, never a 100 meters world champion. So it's a strong feat task, Ato. So we're just going to come off, Ato. We'll get the ball rolling. And for you, Ato Boldon, in relation to the top ranking, the top 10 sprinters of the last 30 years, 100 meters to 200 meters, who takes the number 10 slot?
Are we starting with 100 or 200 first, or is it a combination list?
It's a combination, Ato.
Oh wow, that makes it that much harder. I'm going to say in my combination list, I'm gonna put Mike Marsh at number 10. He doesn't have the 100-meter credentials, but he did run 1973 when the world record was 1972. 1973 is still one of the fastest times ever. He does have that Olympic gold, and he was fairly consistent throughout his career. So Mike Marsh gets my number 10.
You mentioned Michael Marsh there, 1992 Olympic champion, and people talk about the Olympics and the date back, and people remember the names Linford Christie, they remember the names Carl Lewis. But Michael Marsh has started a combination, he started squashed in between us. And what were Michael Marsh's great qualities or techniques as a sprinter? What made him such a great sprinter? And obviously he achieved an Olympic champion as well.
He's one of the best curve runners in the world. Those who are fans from way back will remember that he ran some phenomenal lead-off legs for the United States, including the world record in 1992 in Barcelona. So he actually left the Barcelona Olympics with 2 Olympic golds, an Olympic record in the 200 and a world record in the 4x1 with Dennis Mitchell, Carl Lewis, and Leroy Burrell. He probably would be higher on a 200 only list, but because this is a combination list, I think he's worthy of being on this list at number 10.
So Michael Marsh takes the number 10 spot from the USA. We'll move down the pecking order now. We'll move to the number 9 spot, Ato. And who takes this prize for you?
I'm gonna pick somebody in the number 9 spot that many people might think would factor higher, except I can't put him higher because he only has medals from essentially 1 year, and that is Tyson Gay, who of course was world champion and Olympic champion, world champion in the 100 and the 200 meters, but all of it happened in 1 year. So if you take away Tyson Gay's 2007, he doesn't have any Olympic medals. And the only other medal he has is the silver from getting second to Bolt in 2009 in the 100 and in the 100 meter world record. So I just feel like this is somewhere he does have the American record in the 100 meter dash, and he has a very, very good string of performances in terms of lots of really fast 100-meter runs, lots of really fast 200-meter runs. So Tyson Gay gets my nod at number 9.
Tyson Gay, 2007 Osaka, the 100-meter world champion himself, and Johan Blake tied for the 100 meters, the second fastest athlete ever between them. And when you look at Tyson Gay in his career, will he look back probably with an awful lot of regrets? He was always thereabout. He had that fantastic year, but he was always coming maybe second, third. He had that sort of break, that amazing year, but as a sprinter, he sort of reached his peak, as you mentioned, in that year, and titles sort of eluded him from there on.
Well, I feel his pain. That's exactly what happened to me. His era coincided with the Usain Bolt era. He beat Usain Bolt in 2007 and then never beat him again in a championship once 2008 began. He also had to deal with the likes of Johan Blake and Justin Gatlin. So yeah, he was in a very competitive era of the sprint, running against gentlemen who literally were the first, second, and also in the top 5. And that's before we talk about Asaf Powell. He had to deal with people who were in the top 5 all time in their respective events. So a little bit unlucky for him.
And lastly, before I leave Tyson Gay, as a sprinter, what do you think was it his start or his finish was Tyson's best attributes?
No, not his start. He was probably more known for having to come from behind in a lot of his races. I think it's why he probably he had so many injury problems, because sometimes even in early rounds, because he would always be at a deficit, particularly in the 100 early on, he was always kind of having to floor it to get back into contention. Having said that, though, I believe that Tyson Gay has the fastest 400-meter personal best, with the exception of Michael Johnson, obviously, in terms of the short sprinters, because he was a 44 high personal best quality athlete at 400, and that I think gave him that showed how strong he was, certainly. And how that made him unique among sprinters, because most sprinters don't have a 44-second personal best at 400 meters.
So Ato Boldon, so far we have Michael Marsh from the USA at number 10. We have Tyson Gay at number 9. We're moving up the ladder now, and the number 8 step, the number 8 rung. Who takes this?
Here is where I'm going to put Frankie Fredericks. Frankie Fredericks was world champion in 1993. Silver medal a bunch of times, including in Barcelona and in Atlanta twice. But kind of like me, world titles eluded him because he was in the era of Donovan Bailey and Michael Johnson.
Yeah, and I suppose Frankie Fredericks, Namibia's only sort of Olympic sort of medalist, 1993 in Stuttgart, the 200 meters world champion, won 4 Olympic medals throughout his career, Frankie. And that's a fantastic feat and fantastic of achievement when you look at consecutive Olympics to medal as well. And Frankie, I suppose, to be famous in terms of Namibia and in terms of his era as well, his fellow competitors, they have a great respect for Frankie Fredericks as a sprinter. And you think if Frankie was running maybe in a different era, he'd have more of a medal haul?
Yeah, but you can say that for every sprinter in every era that was second or third. Everybody has to contend with whoever's the dominant sprinter in that era. Think of how many people would have had more memorable careers were it not for the dominance of somebody like Carl Lewis. I remember athletes saying, if they were in a race and they were with Carl in his prime, they knew that essentially they would be running for second because Carl was that dominant.
And I suppose Frankie, in terms of his 200 meters, the technique for 200 meters is very sort of different in terms of the 100 meter race. And in terms of his attributes, what made Frankie Fredericks a really good 200 meter sprinter?
Phenomenal turn runner, good, not great starter, I would say. And Frankie was very consistent. Frankie was in the 1991 World Championships. 1992 Olympics, 1993 Worlds. He had such a long career and he had such longevity. But longevity is one thing. Frankie was extremely consistent. And when you look at the scope of his times and his championships, yes, you can talk about what he was not able to win the ultimate prize in. But Frankie was on just about every single podium for almost a decade, and that's worth commending.
I suppose, Ato, we'll move on. So at 10, we've Michael Marsh. At 9, we've Tyson Gay. At 8, we've Frankie Fredericks. We're coming to the 7th spot now. And who takes this position on the grid?
I think in 7th position, I want to put Justin Gatlin. Olympic champion in 2004 in the 100, world champion in 2005 at 100 and 200, and of course, again at 2017. I think that regardless of the public perception of Gatlin sometimes, which has not always been positive, I think because of his drug tests, I think that people within the sport look at him, they look at his perseverance, they look at what he's been able to do, despite a lot of people sometimes rooting against him. And it's something to be commended. This is somebody who lost to Usain Bolt in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2015. And then in 2017, found a way after literally 5 consecutive times of being on a global final and losing to Bolt. He finally took care of Bolt on his way out in 2017. And then, quite frankly, in one of his best performances, approaching the age of 40, in 2019, he gets the silver behind Christian Coleman in a race where, if you looked at his rounds, he looked like maybe he was not going to medal. We talk about somebody being a gamer and being somebody who rises to the occasion when all the chips are down. And you look at what Gatlin has been able to do since 2004 when he won that Olympic gold. And that's why he gets put here in this spot for me.
And I suppose, Ato, in terms of longevity as a sprinter, in terms of that dedication to the cause for Justin, as you said, he meant many years in Ato's, in Usain's shadow. And for that sort of perseverance as a sprinter, waiting and waiting for the opportunity, and to finally, you're moving on in your career, you're moving into your 30s, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, was I at my peak at 25? Was I at my peak at 26? And to keep maintaining that level of consistency, it is a credit to Justin Gatlin, as you said, to become a world champion. In 2005, he was a world champion, but then again in 2017, 12 years later, to become a world champion. That's fairly unheard of, I take it, in the world of sprinting.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. With the 400 hurdle example, where somebody like Angelo Taylor or somebody like Felix Sanchez can have 8 years in between their Olympic titles, like Felix Sanchez did in 04 and 12, or Angelo Taylor having in 2000 and 2008. To do that in the 100 is so amazing that, like I said, Gatlin is to be commended for that. Yes, he had the 4 years off because of the ban, but that's still pretty remarkable that somebody was able to do that, because it simply has not been done.
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of his great competitor, Usain Bolt, I suppose there was great rivalry from the time they were on the track. But as Usain's career came to the end, their friendship has sort of blossomed now since that period. Since Usain has moved on, and maybe Justin has found even more greater respect for Usain Bolt.
I think Blake always had a lot. I think Gatlin always had a lot of respect for Usain, because I think that after all the talking and the posturing and the press releases were finished, he realized that this is somebody, particularly after 2015, because I, like many other people, thought that Gatlin had finally pulled even with Bolt in 2015, and I think it's because of the poise that Bolt showed. Bolt really had no business winning that race in 2015. But what he showed there is a side that we hadn't seen. Yes, we know the clowning Bolt and the uber talented Bolt, who is so much better than everybody else that most of the time he can just win because he's better than everybody else. He came into that championships at the World Championships in Beijing in 2015 at such a deficit that I think Gatlin looked and he said, oh my gosh, I'm really going to get him. And when Gatlin was the one that blinked in that final and Bolt ran the race necessary to pip him at the end, I think Gatlin looked and he said, oh, this is not just that Usain Bolt is talented and he comes here and he demolishes everybody. He has a will to win and a competitive fire that I don't think even Gatlin had given him credit for. And I think the respect that he had for Bolt even before went up immeasurably after 2015 because Gatlin was forced to say, you know what? Okay, not only do I have to come physically ready to beat this guy, I have to come with such mental acuity that there's no room for error. And that's why I think he finally got him 2 years after at the World Championships, even though we all know that Bolt wasn't anywhere near to his best self.
I suppose, Ato, we'll move on. So at 10 we have Michael Marsh, 9 Tyson Gay, 8 Frankie Fredericks, 7 Justin Gatlin, who's just outside the top 5 at number 6.
I'm going to put 6th as Linford Christie. Linford doesn't really have any world championship credentials at 200, but at one point he did have Commonwealth, European, Olympic, and world titles at the same time. And that, that may be my Commonwealth bias showing, but that to me speaks volumes about the quality of athlete that Linford was. He wasn't bad at 200. At one point, he had, he was always very good indoors, which blows my mind when you see the size and the height of him. But I think that given his consistency, longevity, quality of wins, having all those 4 titles at the same time, and quite honestly, what he was able to do against, the caliber of opposition that he had to face. He had to run against Leroy Barrett. He had to run against Carl Lewis. He had to run against Ben Johnson. He had to run against Calvin Smith. He had to run against Ray Stewart. He had to run against Dennis Mitchell. He had to run against Andre Kaysen. And he was not found wanting between those years of 1992 to 1994. I just like Linford. I always have. He and I have not always gotten along, I guess, in our careers. But that's the nature of competition. Now that my career is 15 years in the rearview mirror, I look back and I realize that I was fortunate to know Linford and to compete against him. The most amazing thing about Linford now that I look back is I go, wait a minute, the only major race that Linford ever beat me in was 1994 Commonwealth when I was, 19 years old. The truth is that I was sort of coming into my own when he was on his way out. But Linford was a phenomenal athlete, competitor, and representative for our sport.
I suppose in terms of Linford Christie, he was the first European to break the 10-second mark in the 100 metres. And if you're talking about Linford, he's coming from the European circuit in terms of his competitors and his challengers. To go from being a European sort of champion to a world champion in terms of the Olympics, where you're meeting the USA, you're meeting the Jamaican sprinters, you're meeting the sprinters from the Caribbean. The competition goes to another level again, another elite level, maybe two or three tiers above, dare I say, at the European Championships. And for Linford to do that in terms of coming from where he's coming from against the competition that he was coming from, that hasn't been done by many European sprinters that have gone being a European champion and then gone to Olympics and said, right, I'm taking on the best of what the Caribbean or America have to offer and I'm going to beat them.
Absolutely. Linford is a one of a kind. And if you want to know how unique he was, look and see how many people have even gotten close to his record, his British records. For all the technology and how much more we know now about sprinting and how to make people fast, nobody's really come close. And I think that the UK looks back at Linford, and they didn't always treat him very well. I thought, one of the things I've been doing during this pandemic is looking back at all the, the old footage, the 25, the 25-year-old footage now of how our sport looked and was presented back in the 90s and the 80s. And I have to say the British press was very unfair sometimes to Linford. And despite that, I think now they look back and they go, wow, we should have appreciated him more while he was there.
I suppose Ato Boldon will continue on. We'll move into the top 5. So far, 10 Michael Marsh, 9 Tyson Gay, 8 Frankie Fredericks, 7 Justin Gatlin, 6 Linford Christie. We're into the top 5 now, and who takes number 5?
I want to be sure that I'm staying within my my rules in terms of years. So give me I have 2 names here. Give me the list again so I can be sure.
1990 until 2019, 2020. So.
Okay, give me the names again.
Yeah, perfect. So we have Carl Lewis, yourself, Carl Lewis, Linford Christie, Donovan Bailey, Maurice, Greene, Ken Collins, Justin Gatlin, Tyson Gay, Usain Bolt, Johan Blake, Christian Coleman, Michael Johnson, Frankie Fredericks, Costinos Quinteras, John Capel, Ramil Gulyev, Noah Lyles, Michael Marsh, and Sean Crawford.
Right. So in this spot, I'm going to put Donovan Bailey.
Donovan Bailey.
World champion in 1995, Olympic champion in 1996, world record holder at 100 meters, world record holder at 50 meters, silver in 1997 at the World Championships. I look back at Donovan's career and I realized that it all kind of happened very quickly. It started in 95, and essentially by the time he gets hurt in 98, that's pretty much the entire scope of his career. But what he did in that time can't be overlooked. 2 world records, Olympic title, Olympic gold in the 4x1 as well. I want to give him extra credit for, and being world champion in 1995. And quite frankly, he sort of resurrected Canadian sprinting, because after Ben Johnson, I don't think the Canadians even wanted to talk at all about sprinting or about track and field. And Donovan gave Canadians something and someone to root for, to cheer for. The fact that he won the Olympic Games on American soil when the USA got no medals in the 100-meter dash, I think really made the whole Canada-USA rivalry. We cannot forget about him winning the USA, the Donovan Bailey-Michael Johnson showdown, which a lot of people remember for it, obviously Michael Johnson not finishing the race. I remember it as the entire world being focused on track and field. That doesn't happen in non-Olympic and certainly non-World Championship years. That race had so much hype behind it globally. I obviously have done TV for the last 15 years. The ratings for it were off the charts. Yeah. So Donovan, I think it's fair to put Donovan here. His 200-meter credentials aren't anything to write home about, obviously, but Donovan did his thing in the 100, and I think he deserves to be here.
In terms of his world record sprints, and if your memories of his world record at the time, I suppose Donovan, it was sort of a flawless sort of run. And did you think, looking at it, there was elements where he could have even gone faster?
In which run was this?
The first one, the first world record.
You mean the 984?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, all of us in that race would have liked to do it over. Maybe not Donovan, because he won and he set the world record. But I know I've talked to Frankie about that race, and I mean, obviously, I was the. People forget, I was in that race. I was 21, 22. I was literally a university. I was just finishing university, so I didn't have, I think, the maturity, the what we call the athletic maturity, to sort of deal with what was going on there with Linford and the false starts and all that drama. And I'm the one that sort of lost my cool, and that certainly didn't help me. But you talk to almost anybody in that race, they felt like that race, all of us could have run better, simply because there was so much going on before the race, and nobody warms up to run 15 minutes after they're supposed to. Everybody warms up to run at a certain time. So yeah, I'm sure that even Donovan looks at that race and goes, yeah, I ran 984 that night, but I probably could have run 982 or 981 because maybe I don't get so far behind in the early going, and maybe I make that great move that I do from maybe, closer to the lead. So yeah, I think everybody looks at that race and they go, yeah, we probably want to do that one over.
I suppose we'll move on. So we have Donovan Bailey at number 5, Ato. Who comes in at number 4?
Number 4 for me is Maurice Greene, my friend and former training partner. Maurice is unique on this list because he has not just multiple world 100-meter titles, because he has 3 of those in 97, 99, and 01, but he also has multiple years of Olympic medals in the 100, and he's got a 200-meter world title as well. So it puts him in a very unique position on this list. And that's before we talk about his world record in the 60-meter dash indoors and his world record in the 100 meters and being the first man under 9.80 seconds. He also had a pretty long career. He showed up in 1997, and the last year that he medaled was 2004. In terms of sprinting, that's considered a long career when you can medal in every year of your career except for one. The one year I know he didn't medal was when he had his motorcycle accident. So that would be 2003. He didn't medal because neither of us made the finals in the Paris World Championship. So Maurice, I feel confident putting Maurice in this position.
In terms of Maurice, and you talk about his world records and the longevity of his world records, and they sort of seemed for a while that they were untouchable, they were unfazable, that no one was going to get him. And obviously Bolt came along and he went to a different sort of era in terms of breaking those records. But at the time, I suppose, everybody looked at Maurice Greene as the poster boy for USA Olympics and USA sprinting, and he was dubbed, he started taking over the crown from Carl Lewis in many people's eyes, and he certainly lived up to the hype and the pressure and the expectation, and everything that was on his shoulders. It didn't bother him, it didn't faze him. He just started took it with his grace, as almost like, right, it started passing on, this is no problem, I'm just going out and I'm just going to achieve what I'm going to achieve.
Yeah, Maurice was a good ambassador for the sport, because when the world's fastest man is American, it makes America pay more attention, I think, to the event and certainly to the sport. And when you consider that Maurice was the king of the hill for 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, for those 5 years, that's a very long reign at the top. Look at the other people on this list. Think about Tyson Gay, who essentially was on the throne for 1 year. Think of Donovan, who was on the throne for 2 years, 95 and 96. Think of Linford, who maybe we said was on the throne for 3 years, 92, 93, and 94. Maurice was on there for 5. Yeah, when you get up to this sort of level on this list, the reason why I'm putting these guys higher is because they were on the throne for a very, very long time.
And now you speak about we're moving up higher in the list. We're going into the bronze position now. And if your terms of Olympics and World Championships, the bronze medal, who gets this, Ato?
My bronze medal here is going to go to Michael Johnson. Because it's a 100-200 list and not a 200-400 list, he's a little lower, because obviously he's the greatest 200-400 combination sprinter of all time, and I don't think anybody's ever going to match what he's done. Repeating as 400-meter Olympic champion, all of the things that he did, including the world records indoors and out. but Michael Johnson was essentially the face of the sport for a very, very long time. And because of that, I think that the combination of longevity, consistency, honors won. This is somebody who literally, after his debacle in 1992, never lost a race in the Olympics, never lost a race at the World Championships. That is unprecedented, and it's something that nobody else on this list can say. His record when the spotlight was at its brightest simply was unmatched.
Yeah, and you mentioned about an event, event man, a showman coming up at the world stage and delivering time out and saving your best performances for when all the world is watching. And even the greater the occasion, it seems to be the greater defeat for Michael Johnson is in terms of the bigger the occasion, the bigger the event, the bigger the crowd. It sort of, in terms of true great sportsmanship, it sort of powered him on to go up. Even in many cars we have 5 gears, but this brought out a 6th gear in Michael Johnson, as the saying goes.
Yeah, Michael Johnson was one of a kind. I competed against him often, and I always got his best. In fact, I looked it up, and I think 2 of his top 3 times were against me. So he got up for me and I got up for him. Now, coincidentally, all of my best times are in races where, almost all of my best times are in races where he was as well. So we brought out the best in each other, but Michael Johnson was a phenomenal sprinter. And only because this is a 100-200 list and not a 200-400 list is he in the bronze medal position. It's the only bronze medal he's ever gotten in his career.
And I suppose, Ato, in terms of, before I move on to your number 2, just a question sort of came to my mind there. You mentioned Maurice Greene at number 4 and Michael Johnson at number 3. 2 great rivalries of yours and 2 great guys you had such many fantastic battles with. But in terms of a one-off race for you, and you had the choice of 100 meters against Maurice Greene or a 200 meters against Michael Johnson, and you're there in the starting block, which do you walk right to Michael Johnson or do you walk left to Maurice Greene?
Probably right to Maurice. I actually beat Maurice at 100 and 200 meters a few times. Michael Johnson never lost to me, even though, go figure, he lost to Maurice at 200. So, like I said, Michael got up for me. He let other people beat him occasionally. He always got up for me. So, yeah, I think if I'm smart, I go in the direction of Maurice Greene. I have a better chance based on the statistics from our careers.
And I suppose no one likes to finish at number 2. I have an idea of the 2 names that are left, and I think I have a fair idea of who these 2 guys are going to be. And it's going to be, I suppose, generations apart, dare I say it. But before we come to who comes in the silver position, just a quick rundown. So at 10, Michael Marsh. To 9, Tyson Gay. 8, Frankie Fredericks. 7, Justin Gatlin. 6, Linford Christie. 5, Donovan Bailey. 4, Maurice Greene. 3, Michael Johnson. And we have another USA sprinter and we have a Jamaican sprinter left. And I have a funny feeling that these might be 1 or 2, unless there might be a bombshell. And even yourself, Ato, you might be come in there.
No, I have excluded myself from this list. I could probably make a case for myself at 10 or 11 or 12. But the truth is, I look at the accomplishments of the people who I have put on this list, and to me, my resume doesn't match this. I never had Olympic gold like Mike Marsh at 10. I didn't have 100 and 200 meter world titles like Tyson Gay. So I'm confident. I'm happy. I'm okay leaving myself out of this top 10, although it's a very non-sprinter-like thing to do.
Okay, so the big debate now, we're coming to it now. Who takes the silver medal? Is it a Jamaican or is it a USA athlete? Or dare I say it, is it someone else?
No, the silver medal position goes to Frederick Carlton Lewis, known to everybody as Carl Lewis, the king. What Carl's resume, and this is and this is completely leaving out the long jump, and he's the best long jumper that has ever walked the face of the earth. What Carl was able to do, both in terms of dragging the sport out of its amateur doldrums, repeating as Olympic champion 84 and 88, being world champion in the 100, being world 200-meter champion, the 4 Olympic golds in Los Angeles. What he was able to do in this sport, only somebody who is a once-in-a-lifetime megastar could push him down to the silver medal. The reason why Carl, to me, is not number one is because of what he was not able to do. So he was not able to repeat as 200-meter Olympic champion, and we have somebody ahead. I have somebody ahead of him who was able to do that not once, but twice. And quite frankly, when Carl started to fall off, it was a precipitous fall. In other words, he was Olympic champion in 84. He was Olympic champion in 88. And then he didn't even make the U.S. team in 92. And then he gets third at the World Championships in 93. And then he doesn't make the U.S. team 95, 96, and then it sort of, that was it. So, yes, when Carl was the king, and of course we have to talk about what Carl could have been had the United States team gone to Moscow in 1980, because you can't ignore that. And I know a lot of the people who are looking at Carl's stats, they see 84 and 88 and they don't realize Carl should have been at the Olympics in 1980, and I'm going to guess that he probably would have beaten Alan Wells in 1980, because even back then, he was a force to be reckoned with. So I am the most confident in my picks in number 2 and number 1, and Carl Lewis for me is number 2 when we talk about the 100 and the 200 of the last 30 years.
I suppose in terms of great sports, we've got to see the rivalries between Pele and Maradona in terms of football. Even in terms of football now today, we have Messi versus Ronaldo, who's better. People get to see him up close. They get to see him playing each weekend out, and they can make their comparisons. But people who grew up watching sprinting in the 80s and the early 90s, maybe the late 80s, they will look at Carl Lewis and say, by God, when I was growing up, he was the man, he was the king, and they probably look now and say Usain Bolt. Well, hold on now, are we diminishing Carl that we haven't given him a chance to? He has never got the opportunity of having a challenger like Usain Bolt, because no one could get near him in that sort of thing. Does that sort of, in terms of Carl Lewis's standing, I know what Usain has been able to achieve, but in terms of Carl Lewis in his peak, he never really had that rival to push him even further.
Well, he had Ben, and we know how that ended. But I don't know that you can say that Carl didn't have any rivals, because if he didn't have a rival, he would have won the 1988 200-meter Olympic crown and not lost it to Joe DeLoach. So we have to be very careful when we talk about if somebody he didn't have a main rival. He didn't have a consistent rival. Although some would say, what about Leroy Burrell, who certainly could have been. Leroy doesn't have any world or Olympic titles, and that's why he didn't even make the list for this criteria. But for me, and it's why you have not heard me mention times very much in this discussion, because I don't want to compare times. Faster tracks now, more information, better shoes, all of that stuff. I don't want it to be a comparison of times. I want it to be a comparison of longevity, dominance, and titles and honors won.
Yeah.
So yes, when I talk about consistency, it's not like, well, you ran 9-8 your whole career. It's you were on the podium your entire career. You were in every big race that you contested. To me, you can talk all you want about Bolt versus Carl. The truth is that Usain Bolt, from 2007 until 2017, when he exits, loses 2 races. He loses the 200 to Tyson Gay in 2007 in the World Championships, and he loses in 2017 when Gatlin and Coleman beat him into third in the 100. That means you've literally gone that 10 years, nobody beats you. Nobody. That to me is why, you know, it's not even close.
And I suppose we'll do the official crowning now of the greatest sprinter of the 100 metres and 200 metres combination over the last 30 years. We'll count it down. 10, Michael Marsh. 9, Tyson Gay. 8, Frankie Fredericks. 7, Justin Gatlin. 6, Linford Christie. 5, Donovan Bailey. 4, Maurice Greene. 3, Michael Johnson. 2, Carl Lewis. And the lightning bolt himself is at number 1, is he, for?
Yes, that will come as a huge support, as a huge shock to anybody who has been watching track and field for the last 15 years, that the young man who went back to back to back, 100, 200, 4x1 Olympic titles, and was undefeated at the World Championships after 2007, with the exception, of course, being when he first started in 2011 and when he lost in 2017. The best for my money, by quite a margin, is Usain Bolt. And I think when you dig deeper, let's forget about how grand his wins were. Let's put that aside for a second. He won in thrilling, endearing, mesmerizing races. But forget that for a second and just look at how hard it is for everybody else on the list, right? We talked about Maurice Greene, who had a long reign of, you know, showing up in '97 and still being world champion in 2001. We know how long Carl was the best in the world, even if we talk about all the Ben Johnson complications. To be that good and to fend off the rest of the world for that long, when everybody every single year starts their offseason saying, Usain Bolt is not going to beat me that year. And then at the end of the year, to have your opponents vanquished, sitting on the ground saying, he got me again. It's not just that Usain is number one. It's that everybody else on this list, I think, has sort of a mini gap between them, certainly in the top 5. And then between Carl and Usain, there's a pretty significant gap, because he did things that not only have never been done before, nobody's even really close. Nobody went 100, 200 in back-to-back Olympics, right? Carl got the closest in having back-to-back and then a silver and a gold. Usain did it in 3 consecutive Olympics, and it's just unheard of, and why this is the easiest pick. Bolt at number 1.
And I suppose, Ato, in terms of finally, just a quick final word on Usain Bolt. You've been working in the media industry for the last, since your career retired, renowned, covering Olympic Games, covering finals. When you were probably there for when Usain Bolt won his first Olympics in the 100 meters and 200 meters, working as a media analyst covering the final. Your memories of after seeing those finals and he achieved these victories, did you think yourself going home that evening, right, this is a guy who could come on and win the next Olympics at the 100, 200 meters, and the Olympics after that, and possibly another Olympics after that? Or did you see after he doing the double in terms of his first Olympics, did you see that sort of, dare I say it, that fortune teller that sort of looking into the future saying, yeah, this is a freak of nature?
I don't know if I could have accurately predicted that he was going to win 2 more Olympics in pretty much the same fashion, being very dominant and so on that night going home after his Beijing exploits. But that's because I saw it as, wow, he is such a he's so jovial, and he's such a character, that this guy's gonna get caught up in the partying and sort of the wine, women, and song. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for that, because I have seen many people who maybe didn't make this top 10 list, who maybe are buried at 15, 16, or 20, who they didn't make it because when the fame came and the money came and the early success came, they couldn't handle it. And they spent all their money and spent all their nights out, late at night, and a lot of the times for young talents, it's the off the track stuff that gets you. So full credit to Usain. As much as he was renowned for his partying and his lifestyle and all that stuff, he clearly was also putting in the work and being very serious. And that's why he had that longevity and he had that consistency and he has the medals and the honors won that he does.
And I suppose just finally for the last 30 seconds, Ato, before I let you go, just two names that sprung to mind that didn't make your list. It's a combination list, but just two guys you mentioned about that sort of lifestyle and not being the dedication to craft. But you've one guy who's been always in the shadow of his counterpart, his teammate in Johan Blake, and another guy, Sean Crawford, who's been dubbed by the same criticism that has been labelled Justin Gatlin. In terms of when people look back on Johan Blake and when they look back on Sean Crawford, maybe in terms of two sentences, what will they remember them as? Nearly men, or I mean, they have achieved championships, but in terms of overall or one hit wonders, or.
Well, I don't know. Sean Crawford had a great career. The truth is, there are Blake fans who would probably say there's no way that you put Mike Marsh ahead of Blake, given that Blake has the 100-meter world title as well as Olympic medals. I just feel like the Olympic record at the time plus the Olympic gold medal, maybe it's even my UCLA bias because he and I went to the same school. You could certainly make a case for putting other guys in some of those slots, certainly at number 10. Crawford probably you could put him on that list towards the bottom as well. The thing with Crawford is he doesn't really have the 100-meter credentials. In terms of, I mean, yeah, he was in the final in 2004, but that's really the only final, if I think correctly, that he was in. Mike Marsh was in more Olympic and World Championship finals. But yeah, Blake, I don't think Blake was a lifestyle issue. I think Blake, I mean, obviously came around at the time where he's the second fastest man of all time. So if Bolt is not around, he certainly has a lot more medals in his cabinet. To a lesser degree, though, Sean Crawford, who was a phenomenal sprinter and a deserving Olympic champion in 2004.
Ato, an absolute pleasure as always for joining us this evening to recap and give us your top 10 100 meters and 200 meter sprinters of the last 30 years from 1990 to 2019. And dare I say it, when you look at the top three alone, it just stands a testament of your knowledge of sprinting. And in terms of the placing three of the all-time greats, you just 4, 5, and I dare I say it, Ato, there's a case that you could be on number 7, number 8, number 9, number 10 there yourself. But an absolute pleasure, Ato Boldon, for joining us this evening and crowning Usain Bolt as a top sprinter in the 100 meters and the 200 meters of the last 30 years. And for us here, Ato, the last thing for us, enjoy your coaching career with all your athletes and your sprinters and your media work, and stay safe, and to your family and loved ones, stay care in these troublesome times. A pleasure as always, Ato.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and all the best to you and yours.
Thank you.